To learn about the off-grid lifestyle and to be inspired to live your dreams, click subscribe so you don't miss anything. Hit the bell notification. My first piece of mail, and it's going to go to the government. It's a rural customer delivery instructions. It goes to the post office so I can get mail finally delivered to my off-grid living property, my tiny house. This is just insane. I wonder if when they had the Pony Express, and the ponies had to ride out, hundreds of miles, trade out horses and riders and carry on. If they actually had to go through all this nightmare to get their mail. It's ridiculous. Every little thing you do now has an enormous amount of time wasted, bureaucracy, step after step after step. Nobody knows what they want to do. So to recap the nightmare, this thing's taken about 3 weeks to get an address to this piece of property. And I still don't know if we legitimately got it. I don't know if we'd have taken the normal path if we would have gotten an address. I don't think we would have. In my mailing address, my hometown, where I pay my taxes and everything. See, we just bought this property just a few months ago. And my goal was to build this tiny house. And then after the tiny house was built, then I would get an address. Now, the sheriff department is the one who gives out addresses in this county. So government entity number one, well, actually government entity number two, I'll explain. I wasn't going to get an address until after I got the house built, because in the instructions it says you have to have a building on the property. That doesn't make a lot of sense. Even people on in comment section of the video I made about this said, how do you pay your taxes if you don't have an address? How'd you buy the property if you don't have an address? On and on. And I agree with all that. Apparently you don't need any of that. They can take your money just that easy. Anyway, what they do is they send the taxes up to my address in the town that I live, that I pay taxes in. You can own property and not live on it. But in order to actually identify the piece of property, they really don't. But the title is very generic. I'll read you what it says, so they don't have to have an address. Now, I'm not going to read off the property numbers, the section numbers, township numbers, all that. I'll just say number here. It says all parts of the west half, of the north half, of the northeast quarter, of the southeast quarter of section, number here, township, number here, north range, number here, west county. I'm not going to give you the county either. East 70 yards, thence south 70 yards, thence 70 yards west, thence north 70 yards, to the place of the beginning containing one or more or less acres. It talks about the highway and what corners of the highway, so forth and so on. But it doesn't give an address, it just gives all these marker locations. So that's how they collect taxes. So to give you the backstory a little bit, we had to go to the driver's license office to renew my driver's license. Well, they said that they were going to mail it. Well, I mean, that's really odd to me, because in the past, they've always given them to me right at then. So in order to mail it, they were going to mail it to the address that I officially have. Well, that meant that I would have to go back there. It's a 2.5-hour drive. It was a long drive. Now, a lot of people suggested, hey, get general mail. Well, if you actually haven't gotten general mail in the past, I've done it one time. I tried to get general mail, and it was complete failure. And what do they say? Burn me once, shame on you. Burn me twice, shame on me. So I'm not going to try the general mail thing again. I told my mom, which is in the same town that my address is, that I was going to get a post office box down here. So I went to get a post office box, and they said you have to have a street address in order to get a post office box in the area that you are. Patriot Act or something. I don't know. It just seems like everything is a nightmare in order to get a simple address, something that you got to have. I mean, it's not too critical for me because I can still go up to Mom's every now and then. It's a nice little visit, but it's just an inconvenience. Of course, we don't have any bills. Any bills that we have are online, such as our phone bill, insurance. We can all do that all online. So it's not overly critical. And so the post office lady told me that the address to this area, she gave me instructions how I could find it all out. Anyway, the last time someone has lived on this property was in 1975. And since then, they have changed from rural routes to street addresses. The rural route here no longer exists. It was also a separation of property. So I think the address is over about 100 yards away from us down there. When they split it up, they didn't give this one the address, they gave it over to that other one. So, I mean, it's just a long, complicated process to get an address on something that's never had an address. Now, a lot of people say, hey, what about your electric pole over here? Call the electric company. I have called the electric company, and they said the same thing. Well, it's a rural route. They don't exist anymore. So, in order to take care of this, you have to call the sheriff's department, which is the 911 call center, and they do the mapping for the area. The sheriff controls the addresses. Well, when we were talking about how to get an address here, he says, well, you can't get an address unless there's a building. We talked about the trailer pad or a foundation or whatever you want to call it. Well, apparently they sent somebody out and they said, no, you can't have an address until we are finished with the tiny house. Now, to make things more complicated, you can't build anything legally unless you have a permit. So if I wanted to actually build 800 square feet, now you can build houses that are under 800 square feet or under 400 square feet, excuse me, in this county without a permit. And you can live in those dwellings. But if you wanted to build a full-size house, you can't get a permit without an address. I called, you can't do it. So I told the guy at the 911 call center that we have less than a 400 square foot house. Will I be able to get an address then? I explained to him that we're building it on an existing trailer frame, mobile home trailer frame here. And he said, well, yeah, what we'll try to do, we can say it's a mobile home. And he says, so when you call back after you get the place built, just say it's a mobile home. Don't even go into what you've told me here. So essentially what he's suggesting that I have to do is I have to lie or at least hide the full truth. I mean, yeah, I guess you can call this a mobile home. What if someone was come out and do an inspection and they've listed this thing as a mobile home and they look at it and say, it's not a mobile home? I mean, are they going to revoke my address? Fine me? I don't know. You're always at risk of being fined, but I don't want to give it the opportunity to outright lie, and when they come out and say that I lied, then I get fined. But what are you going to do? You got to have an address at some point. So even if they fine me $1,000, which is highly unlikely, okay, fine. It still saves me a ton of money by building a $5,000 tiny house. Now, here's where I had an advantage that I'm not sure anybody else would have. I had a subscriber call the county building permit, whatever they are, and they came out to do an inspection on my septic system. The subscriber suggested that I was dumping waste in the creek. Well, he came out and realized, no, I'm doing everything totally legal. We talked about the tiny house and we talked about the address. Now, had he never come out, I would not have learned anything. What he said was call the building permit company and talk to him and say that he had come out, talked to me about this. So anyway, I called and I explained the whole situation. The guy came out, he said, oh yeah, I remember all that. He said he was going to call the sheriff's department, the 911 call mapping center, and have a discussion about how they can overcome this problem where we have to have an address for a permit, but you can't get a permit without an address. Well, I don't know, 2 or 3 days later, the 911 call center called me back and said, we got your address. Well, great. How did this happen? Well, he said, well, I had a discussion with the permit center and we worked out some things that if you have some sort of structure on it, that we can go ahead and permit it because, and he said, in case you have a fire or a medical emergency, we need to be able to find where you're at. I don't want to give you a lot of information so people can find me, but in this area, a lot of people do buy summer houses and cabins and different things. And not all of them are going to be 800 square feet. So they have to make accommodations for all this. So you can get an emergency services. So I got an address simply because I had a subscriber who thought it would be funny to turn me in on something that I was not violating. So it all worked out in the end. But I am telling you, in order for you to survive in this world, the government is actually telling you now that you have to lie. That you have a mobile home when you don't actually have a mobile home, so you can get an address. Well, then you go back to the post office and they have to wait 2 or 3 days to give you a call to tell you where they want you to put the mailbox. I thought, well, isn't it by the road? Shouldn't I put it on the same side of the road? Is that what everybody else has? Well, no, don't do anything until they call you. Well, they call me, and it's exactly where I thought I needed to put it. So I had to wait 3 or 4 more days, I think maybe even a week, before I could actually put a mailbox up. And then, of course, you got the regulations, how far away from the road and how tall. So yesterday I was able to dig a hole, pour some concrete, and put in my mailbox. It cost me $40 for the mailbox, but it took, I think, 3 or 4 weeks to get an address. So if you decide that you're going to live off-grid, recognize that the whole reason you're living off-grid is to get disconnected from government and different things. But government is going to do whatever they can to try to pull you back in. Just make it an absolute runaround to get something that's so simple, a simple address. Thanks for watching.